Let's get to that attack at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. It is the 8th major terror attack during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. This after the killing of innocent young girls in Manchester, England. A busload of Christians murdered in Egypt. ISIS beheading a police chief in the Philippines. 3 more policemen killed by a suicide bomber in Jakarta, Indonesia. And the London Bridge attack just this past weekend. Terror expert and former Trump campaign and foreign policy advisor, he's Walid Phares, who joins me now. Walid, what are your thoughts about all of these attacks?
Well, you just introduced it. This is a wave. This is a very large wave. We've seen different and previous waves before that. What is different at this point in time is the fact that they're using different tactics, different weapons, from explosive to machine gun in some cases, and of course to the knives, the trucks, the cars, and now with this last weapon, medieval weapon in Paris. You know,
Walid, let's tie this to what is going on in Syria. U.S.-backed coalition forces really closing in on Raqqa, trying to wipe out ISIS from there, the de facto capital, shutting down the twin capital of Mosul as well.
Yeah.
It seems, is it to your thinking that ISIS is taking its insurgency to European shores, to U.S. shores, to places in Asia? And should the police around the world and law enforcement around the world, should they be on offense right now instead of, you know, the Paris police immediately took down that hammer-wielding attacker. It took police in London to be criticized for taking 8 minutes to respond to the attack over the weekend. Should they be more on offense now? What do you think?
Liz, first of all, you're absolutely right. There is a link between the fact that the caliphate of ISIS in Iraq and in Syria, let's not forget also in Libya, are shrinking. These entities are shrinking. So in return, and as a desperate move, the ISIS International is giving guidelines to anybody, any jihadist, member or not, to strike everywhere they can in the West or in within any country that is involved against them. And that's what we see right now happening in Europe. Now, on the other hand, with regard to what can we do, we have to finish the job in Syria and Iraq, that's for sure. In the West, we have to be proactive. We have to make sure that we have better intelligence, better vetting. And obviously, as we saw in France and in London, the speed with which police is responding is going to make a big difference in the lives and the survival of individuals.
Yeah, you make a good point also about vetting. I mean, how do you vet from failed states like Syria and Libya? That's why the Trump administration is pushing back about the travel policy. We're going to get to that in a second. But to your point about the various weapons that ISIS and these terrorists are using, the president recently tweeting, do you notice we're not having a gun debate right now? That's because they use knives and a truck. What do you think?
He's right. I think the point is made that it's not about specific weapons, it's not about firearms. It's really about all kind of arms that they can use. It could go as high as a sophisticated bomb that we may have not seen yet, to as low as maybe without using weapon, with the capacity of their hands or you know, other ways. So what is important now is the intention in their head. These people have been radicalized. These people have been indoctrinated. And again, bringing it back to the first point, it's all about vetting. And vetting means not getting the Social Security, how many trips they've taken. It's really to see how do they react to ideologies, how do they react to some political events, and that's how we know that they're radicals.
You know, Walid, one of the terrorists who carried out Saturday night's savage slaughter in London reportedly arrived in the UK as a refugee with his parents from Pakistan. And we had this, former FBI Director James Comey, he testified recently that there are not just 900 terrorist suspects here in the U.S., he's talking 2,000. He's talking homegrown and more. He also said 300 of those 2,000 were refugees. Let's listen. I'd like your reaction.
We have about 1,000 homegrown violent extremist investigations. Then we have another big group of people that we're looking at who we see some contact with foreign terrorists. So you take that 2,000 plus cases, about 300 of them are people who came to the United States as refugees.
You know, but the media is reporting about Trump's tweets instead of this issue about proper vetting when you have, you know, a lot of women were slaughtered in that London Bridge attack. Innocent people are being killed. What are your thoughts?
Look, what the former director said is very important. He did not say 1,000 person. He said 1,000 case. And that means that it could be 3 times, 4 times more. And remember, every time a jihadi is arrested, if he survives, or even if they are killed, what happens, as in London and here, we are arresting, i.e. authorities of the West are arresting 10 times more. So the networks may be much wider, much more numerous than what we really understand it is.
You know, we have this story for you, too. Defense Secretary James Mattis, he is saying now that the military here in the U.S. and overseas, that they're going to use annihilation tactics against ISIS. Let's take a listen.
We're going to have to take that caliphate down, or the attacks that you've seen going on around the world that you all have reported on will continue. The enemy has got to be taken out by military means where they are powerful enough to cause these attacks on others, and we can't sit idly by and let them hold it.
Will this work?
Yes, annihilation, what he means by that, I suppose, is that once they are defeated out of and pushed out of Mosul or Raqqa, we don't want their military machine to be formed again in some other place, in Jordan, in Saudi Arabia, in Lebanon. So it's a dismantlement of the military machine in any way and shape possible. That's a strategic goal. But again, what is more important, or as important, what will happen next when we liberate these areas?
Right.
We don't want to make the mistake of Iraq. We liberated Iraq, and then Al-Qaeda too came back. So we want to be very smart as to make sure that we have our moderate Arab allies taken over under our auspices.
Yeah, and you know what, Walid, to your point, all right, so as the noose cinches tighter on ISIS, on their twin capitals, and the caliphate gets wiped out, there has to be a reset. There has to be a rethink. That insurgency will not stop. It could come to our shores. The media needs to focus on that. They need to make it a priority. They need to report on how the vetting is being done. What do you say?
I'm very, pessimistic about how most of the media, not all of it, is dealing with this issue, because the intellectuals behind the understanding that the media is developing do not agree that we are at war, do not agree that the jihadists have an ideology, and do not agree that this ideology can by itself regenerate more jihadists in the future. So they have a different pre-9/11 mentality that needs to change.
To your point, military units took to the streets of France. Military units took to the streets of Britain. I mean, when you see soldiers on the streets, that tells you that, people who are dealing with this feel like we're at war. Final thought.
Well, I think that we are at war. After 9/11, we had many opportunities in the region and elsewhere to change the course. We were not able to do so. That's why now Washington, and I hope the other capitals in Europe, will choose another path, which is defeat and crush ISIS and make sure we are doing a strategic vetting, not just a severe one, a strategic long-term vetting.